Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Phillips Academy here at the Old South Meeting House. I'm John Palfrey, head of school, and just delighted to welcome you all here. We have been looking forward to this day for quite a while. We have not had, I think, ever quite such a response to a regional event. I'm told this is a record to have a sellout in Boston in this way. So we're so thrilled that all of you responded to this wonderfully intellectual / geeky alumni event, and we're just thrilled that you are here. I want to welcome each one of you personally, but I also want to welcome and thank a couple of people who are our trustees and trustees emeriti who are here with us. Sandy Uri in the front row. Sandy, will you give us a wave? Welcome back. And Betsy Parker Powell, I saw a moment ago. Betsy, where are you? Give a wave, please. And Tamara Rogers, who is also here. Tamara, where are you? Give a wave, thank you. And one thing that is wonderful about each of these women is that they have represented us on the board from Abbott Academy as well as Phillips Academy, and we welcome you and thank you all for your service to Andover. I also want to welcome back Mrs. Sizer. Nancy Sizer and her daughter Judy are here also to represent their family, and as the 15th head of school, we welcome you back very, very warmly. We're thrilled that you are here. Thank you. So you may well know of the long historical tie that exists between Phillips Academy and the United States of America. There are many such ties. I love the basic idea that Samuel Phillips Jr. in 1778 was doing a whole bunch of things for our country. As you may know, he was providing some munitions to General Washington, his friend. He was also one of the two people chosen by General Washington to help round up troops to help fight in the Revolution. And it's remarkable to me that in that moment, in the midst of a revolution, he chose to start a school. It's sort of amazing to think in that, hinterland out 20 miles from Boston that the family did. And of course, about 50 years later, created Abbott Academy, and the rest is history. But it's just an amazing fact that these patriots decided not only should they fight back against the British, but they should also create a school that would educate youth from every quarter, and on it goes. We also thought about the connection of the space. You may know this if you read a little bit about the Old South Meeting House, or if you remember your days on the Freedom Trail as a child. How many people went on the Freedom Trail and remember having been here? It's actually quite cool. Maybe there's a high correlation between doing the Freedom Trail and coming to Andover. But as you probably know, this was the space chosen most frequently for those who were trying to foment a rebellion to argue about whether or not to separate from Britain. And it was right here that literally so many people, that in one event by some reports as many as 1,000 people, tried to cram in here into this space to argue over whether or not to have the Boston Tea Party in 1773. And I thought some about doing an event that had a debate based on the Boston Tea Party because it's the same space, but it actually seemed like that might be too easy a debate, whether or not we should separate from Britain. I didn't know how many people were going to sign up to be Tories and to plan to be a colony, so I thought that might be too easy. So we decided to do something else instead. So the game plan for this evening is it's going to be highly interactive, and you all, just so you know, are going to do some work. You are going to be involved, so I'm putting you on notice. We did send you the homework in advance. If you did not read the homework in advance, it's on your chair, so you can pull it out. And there's going to be a moment where it's going to become interactive, and you're going to do something. So I'm just warning you that part. For those of you who remember, how many people took History 300 or 310 or some equivalent? Look at that, lots and lots. And the History 35 was the number? And was there an Abbott equivalent of, what was the U.S. History course called, Betsy? Senior History. So how many people took Senior History from Abbott? Excellent, some equivalent. I suspect you all remember it very, very fondly, and we are going to revive that here. When I was at first couple of years of my job, I was teaching a different class. I was teaching a class on hacking, which was getting kids involved in creating computer code and thinking about the ethics. But I would look somewhat longingly over at the U.S. History Department because they got to teach this awesome class, which we now call History 300 and History 310. And I knew that Mr. Sizer and others and Barbara Landis Chase, who preceded me, had actually been members of the history. It's now called the History and Social Sciences Department. And so one day I knocked on the door of the chair of the department and I said, would you mind if I joined your department and stopped doing this hacking experiment over here and actually came and taught U.S. history. So I've had the enormous pleasure the last 2 years of teaching U.S. history, the course in Samuel Phillips Hall. Sam Phil 102 is my classroom, and it is total heaven to slam that door and have those 12 kids and go through this amazing narrative of United States history. And it turns out that this week, one of the things that we're having our kids do is what you are about to do, which is to compare and contrast the vision for America that Alexander Hamilton had and the one that Thomas Jefferson presented. So literally this week, students in History 300 are doing a writing assignment, and they have to pick one or the other, and they have to defend whether that vision was the right one or was the other the right one. So we thought maybe what we should do is to invite back some of the true greats from the history department and have them lead a class. So we're going to have a class in here. We are going to start off with a presentation that will give you some background to go from. There's then going to be a moment when I'm going to ask you to pick sides. So you're going to have to decide whether you prefer the vision for America of Hamilton and Jefferson. You are then going to move to a certain side of the room to represent it, and then you are all going to have a class, and I'm going to moderate that part, and then we will have a summation. That is the game plan. So it's highly interactive, and it is absolutely going to depend on your intelligence that is going to lead us home. I have the enormous pleasure of welcoming back two members of the History and Social Sciences Department, which I think is the real reason we have a sellout tonight. First is Tony Rotundo. Tony, who is closer to me, is a graduate of Wesleyan, of Harvard, and Brandeis, and he taught at Phillips Academy for 33 years. Tony is the... Yeah. Tony is the author of American Manhood, Masculinity from the Revolution to the Modern Era, which is a critically acclaimed book, and numerous scholarly and popular articles on U.S. history topics. He has served on the editorial boards of several journals related to history and of gender, and was elected to the Society of American Historians in 2008. And Tony is going to do the summation. So he is actively taking notes, and he's going to give us the final word. After I speak now, I'm going to call up for the introduction and the spirited beginning of the night from Vic Henningsen. A graduate of Yale, Stanford, and Harvard, Vic Henningsen taught history at Phillips Academy in Andover, Mass. For more than 30 years. During that time, he also served as a visiting scholar at Dartmouth and held research fellowships at the Massachusetts Historical Society and the Thomas Jefferson Foundation at Monticello. Still an active historian and teacher, he is also a regular commentator for Vermont Public Radio, and you can get that via the internet from anywhere. So you can listen to to Vic's amazing podcasts from wherever you are. Vic Henningsen, you are up.
Thank you, John. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's a great pleasure to see so many people here, so many faces that I remember so well. I'm going to dive right in, and I'm going to tell you that the period from 1789 to 1801 was the most challenging in our history. Those who point to the 1850s or who argue that today's polarized era is worst ever certainly have a case, but they have to contend with the fact that the challenges of those decades are rooted in what happened in the 1790s, where those involved did not have a long American history to fall back upon for guidance, however useful that may be. The history those people knew was the history of republics, particularly the Roman Republic, all of which failed because they became corrupt. Those people believed that they were fighting against historical odds, and that belief animated everything they did and everything they said. Now, those feverish apprehensions are difficult for us to recapture today because, of course, they were successful and their fears did not materialize. But they believed with every fiber of their being that their Republican experiment was constantly threatened with extinction. A threat posed, ironically, by each other. For here, men who had joined to make a revolution fell out over their interpretation of what that revolution meant. Recall that in 1789, the Confederation was being replaced by a union, a more tightly gathered network overseen by a new federal government. But the concept of nation, with which we are so familiar, of one unified whole, remained strange and unwelcome. When people referred to the U.S., they did so in the plural. The United States are. It would take a civil war and Abraham Lincoln to define the U.S. as a nation and make us an is instead of an are. Indeed, in an early session of the new House of Representatives in 1789, James Madison was rebuked for using the word national, a term so suspect it was omitted from the Constitution. Most Americans liked the Confederation. It left them alone. They didn't want much from a central government. The Confederation didn't give it to them. Advocates of the new Constitution won the ratification struggle because of their prestige, their determination, and their political skill, not because of their numerical strength in the population at large. So it remained to be seen whether Americans would accept and abide by their new central government. After all, Benjamin Franklin had warned that the great question before the American people was whether they could live under a government of their own making, since the one political talent they demonstrated was that of overthrowing governments. Now, George Washington and those he brought into government with him, most notably Alexander Hamilton as Treasury Secretary and Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State, understood that. They knew that their major challenge would be to establish a truly Republican, small r, Republican government with enough power to act, but without becoming overbearing or tyrannical. The Constitution, after all, was only an outline. It remained to create an actual functioning government. This would not be easy, and to understand why not, it's important to remember that what set the men of this generation apart from any others in our history was the fact that they were revolutionaries. They possessed a particular and a personal understanding of the American Revolution and of the Constitution that they had created to put the meaning of that revolution into action. In their eyes, a challenge to that understanding, even from people they'd known and trusted for years, was not just a difference of opinion, but a fundamental threat to the future of the Republican experiment itself. In this sense, the personal and the political merged to a degree we have not experienced since. Now, to dramatize this, we must relive a moment that will help us understand more directly the nature of the tensions that strained the Republic and the relations between these two men. So I invite you to join me now in the year 1789 in a random part of rural America where, let's remember, the majority of the population lived. And I believe we have among us this evening some people who hold bonds that were issued by the Continental Congress back in 1781. Would you people who hold those bonds please stand up? Okay. I'm going to ask each person, or people in one case, to introduce himself or herself and tell us who they are and how they came by this piece of paper. And you can hold up the piece of paper and show other people what it looks like. There it is. Continental Bond, right, granted to Major Frank Herron with grateful thanks of the Continental Congress, July 1781. In recognition of your service and sacrifice, thank you, we will pay you $50 in 1791. We promise. No kidding. Major Herron, would you like to explain what's going on here?
I'll explain a little bit about myself. I am a major from the Marblehead Regiment. I was not there at Lexington and Concord. I was in a pub. But after that, I participated in the fighting at Long Island or Brooklyn Heights, Saratoga, Monmouth, Valley Forge, and unfortunately, a bad end game at Yorktown. I lost my leg. Excuse me. And now I'm in a little bit of dire straits. I have this bond. I also have a wife who knows nothing about finance and nothing. So she is of no help whatsoever. And I may have to move out west, meaning Worcester. I'm at wit's end.
Let's be clear that they gave you this bond because they couldn't give you a pension. They also couldn't pay your back salary, could they? Nope. Okay. Or the bar bill. Okay, we have two enlisted men here. Could you tell us your sad tale, please?
So this tall man and myself, we're the Smith brothers. We entered the Army in 1775 and saw service throughout the war. We were mentioned in dispatches for bravery and distinguished conduct at the battles of Long Island, White Plains, Trenton, Princeton, and the list goes on. We nearly died at Valley Forge, but pulled through because our buddies refused to give up on us.
After Yorktown, we got sick of waiting to get pay from Congress. So we, along with our comrades, went to Philadelphia. They fled from us. We tracked them to Princeton, tracked them to Annapolis, where we were finally able to corner them with those comrades who served so bravely with us.
But they couldn't pay us our back salary, so they gave us a bond, like Mr. Henningsen told us about, which will mature in 1791. But we'd like to get married and start a career, which isn't really possible for impoverished veterans, so we need money now.
Thank you. It gets worse. Now, I don't think you served in the ranks,
No.
but you made a major contribution. Would like to explain what's going on here, Mrs. Sizer?
Yes. I am a widow, far advanced in years. My husband died at the Battle of Long Island. My 3 sons were taken prisoner and died in captivity. All I have left is a grandson, but he's the treasure of my heart. I didn't fight, but I gave you what I could to buy the soldiers food and clothing and let them have blankets. I think I have done as much in terms of what I could do to support the cause as many that sit down now at the helm of government. My bonds are supposed to be worth $50, and I need that $50 because I'm very interested in sending my grandson to a new school I've heard about that seems to be really wonderful. I mean, youth from every quarter is what they say. And I'd like my youth to be in your quarter, their quarter. However, what you tell me now is they're worth nothing. What is going to happen to my grandson? Will he get a scholarship? Does anyone have any clout here who could give him a scholarship? Who knows? Anyway, how will I support myself? How will I survive, having given so much and received so little in return but the empty thanks of a corrupt Congress?
Well, times are tough out in the hinterland. Now, these are just representative examples. If you multiply them by several thousand, you have the largest single group of people to whom the government of the United States owed money. In that little handout we gave you the low-end estimate of the national debt in 1790, $6 trillion, for a nation of 3.5 million and some 700,000 enslaved Africans. The upper end of that estimate, which we didn't put in because it would seem too outrageous, but there are some economists who argue for it, is $16 trillion. That's a lot. The problem, as you know, is that these bonds, which are supposed to mature in 1791, 20 years after their issue, are almost worthless, and these people are in dire financial straits. But I know you. You're William Phillips. Would you like to explain yourself? Why are you here? There you go.
Hey. I'm William Phillips, and I've just come down from Boston, and I arrived just in time to hear these tales of woe. And I have to tell you, it grieves my heart. It makes me wroth with anger to hear that our young republic is unable to meet the basic needs of these virtuous citizens and of these Republican mothers and widows who have sacrificed their lives for this young republic. It grieves me with shame to think of the picture that our fair republic represents in the eyes of the world, to understand that our government cannot meet its most basic and sacred obligations to virtuous citizens and Republican mothers and widows who have sacrificed life, limb, and family in order to create our freedom. Now, it just so happens that I have a solution for my fellow citizens. I am willing to offer you 25 cents on the dollar for the worthless pieces of paper that you were given as thanks for your sacrifice in our recent War of Independence. Now, I know that you were promised a larger amount of money than that, but as you know as well as I do, the piece of paper you now hold in your hand is worth less than that ancient set of your grandfather's breeches that sit in the trunk in your attic. I am willing to give you 25 cents on the dollar for every one of those, and it does my heart good to be able to perform a socially useful service for my fellow citizens who otherwise will be completely unremunerated for their life and loss of limb, for the sacrifices that they have made for our young public.
All right, ladies and
Please
gentlemen,
consider my offer.
hands up. How many of you think these poor people should take this offer? Remember, they can't see the future. They're desperate. These pieces of paper are worthless. And Mr. Phillips here, a speculator from Boston, is offering them good cash money, and they really need it. Are you going to hand over your bond? I think you should. We need you to hand the bond over. Guys, you going to hand over the bonds? Okay. You going to hand it over?
5 cents for each dollar?
Yep.
I'll do it.
Good. Good. How about it?
I'll be happy to meet you afterwards.
All right.
Mr. Heron, I think you should have asked your wife.
Okay. Okay, good, good. You have it all now. Congratulations. And you people have the money that you desperately need to do whatever it is you need to do. Now, fast forward 1 year, 1790. You, sir, who are you and what are you doing here?
I am Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury of these United States, sir.
And your purpose here this evening?
My purpose here is to make good on the promise of the American government. Anyone who can produce one of those continental bonds that we issued shall get full face value, $50. I will pay anyone $50 for a Continental bond that they can produce for me tonight.
You are
Sir, did I hear you have one?
Somewhere. My wife has
You are redeeming these bonds at par, at full value?
Face value. We're the United States government and we keep our promises.
Who's got it?
No?
No? No?
Mrs. Sizer? No?
William
Oh, my
Phillips! William Phillips!
Oh!
Would you mind reminding us of the institution you founded, the First Bank of Massachusetts?
The First Bank.
First Bank. So, William Phillips, you have all of this money. All these poor people can't accept Alexander Hamilton's generous offer because it goes to whoever's holding the paper. William Phillips, the speculator, holds the paper.
I took the risk.
Hang on. I got to ask you, before Scrooge McDuck gets his word in here, how many of you people think this is fair? Hands up if you think this is fair. Okay. How many of you think this is an outrage? Hands up. Okay, let's start with those of you who think it's an outrage. Somebody want to tell me why you think it's an outrage? What's so outrageous about this? Yes, ma'am.
I think he had inside information.
You think he had inside information? Yes, over here. I'm sorry?
Aren't they all dead? They only lived to 34.
No, they're not all dead. That's an average. Includes all the Africans. Other people who think this is an outrage?
The government should pay its debts.
The government should, yeah. How about the government should pay the people who made the sacrifice, right? The people who went through hell to bring this revolution home and create this Republican society. Who gets their money?
Government should protect people from speculators.
Yes, we're enriching the 1% here. That's exactly right. All right, now those of you who think, no, this is fair, maybe tough, but it's fair, stand up and let us know.
These people lost faith because the value was zero. They chose to take a quarter of the potential value.
They took a risk,
But they also then lost faith.
right? Yeah. Okay, they lost faith. Yes, sir.
If we're ever going to need money as a country again, we need to establish good credit.
Absolutely. The government has to stand by its obligations. People get hurt in the process. That's unfortunate. Other comments here? William Phillips took a risk. He didn't know that Alexander Hamilton was going to do this. That was in 1789. This is 1790. So you can make the case that this is a fair deal. Well, this, in a nutshell, is what the 1790s were all about. This is only in part about finance. Its larger significance is what it suggests about the kind of government we're going to have and how that government will act or not act on the side of the people. Jefferson, Madison, and others were outraged because the common people who had made the sacrifice were sacrificed themselves to the 1%. Although Hamilton and others did not oppose rewarding Republican virtue, they saw that, in this case, as beside the point, and, in this case, as impractical. As Lin-Manuel Miranda has Hamilton saying to Jefferson in the current Broadway hit, Hamilton, "Welcome to the present. We're running a real nation." Well, let's just remind ourselves of who these people were. Alexander Hamilton, you know, was born and bastard in the Caribbean, an immigrant to New York as a teenager. He was and he remained a lifelong outsider who always referred to the U.S. as this country, never my country. By contrast, Jefferson was intensely local Southern aristocrat, very much the insider. When he referred to my country, he meant Virginia. Hamilton was a realist. He saw things as they were, and spent his energy trying to turn his ideas into reality. Jefferson was more of an idealist who saw things as he thought they ought to be and waited for reality to catch up. Hamilton was pessimistic about human nature. His favorite Enlightenment philosopher was Thomas Hobbes. Jefferson was optimistic and preferred John Locke. Hamilton was nervous, excitable, direct, also abrasive and haughty. He enjoyed the cut and thrust of political conflict. He welcomed debate. Jefferson was calm, amiable, charming, but elusive, averse to confrontation, and he hated public speaking. It's been said that Hamilton's natural habitat was an urban web of commercial and professional relationships dating back to his youth in the West Indies. We need to remember that when Hamilton was younger than most Andover students today, he was in day-to-day charge of a merchant shipping firm office in St. Croix, supervising ships, crews, cargoes, developing intimate knowledge of international commerce and finance in the incredibly complex and unbelievably competitive Sugar Islands, which were at the time the epicenter of world trade. Thence to the legal world of New York City, combat in the Continental Army, constitutional politics in New York, and finally to Washington's cabinet at Treasury. Jefferson, by contrast, inhabited an agrarian world defined by personal relationships, family, neighbors rich and poor, and yes, the some 200 slaves he owned. His political colleagues in Virginia were people he'd known most of his life. His most effective service before the cabinet had been a brief moment as the draftsman of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and more recently as a diplomat in Europe. Where Hamilton sought political office and gloried in it, Jefferson was often reluctant to assume it and complained regularly that he'd rather be at home with his books. Hamilton had few interests outside the law, politics, and economics. Jefferson, we know, was a Renaissance man, scientist, inventor, musician, architect, the list goes on. We recall John Kennedy's remark at a White House dinner in 1962 for Nobel laureates, that this was probably the largest gathering of wit and talent in the East Room since Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Each could be underhanded. When John Adams retained most of Washington's cabinet, Hamilton, though out of office, connived with his former colleagues to undermine Adams's policies. Earlier, Jefferson had worked secretly through proxies in Congress to impeach Hamilton's performance at Treasury and force his ouster. Each was unsuccessful. Both understood that political legitimacy came ultimately from the people, but disagreed on the actual role the people should play in the affairs of state. Both understood that there was a delicate balance to be struck in putting the new federal government into operation, but clearly each struck that balance in a different place. Hamilton wanted to enhance the power of the federal government over the states and the executive branch over the legislature. Jefferson sought the reverse. This was a struggle over vision, and from it emerged something the framers of the Constitution had not anticipated: America's first political parties. Federalists grouped around Hamilton, and Democratic Republicans, commonly called Republicans, no relation to the current party, anchored by Jefferson and Madison. Their first confrontation came, as we have seen, over the plan for funding the national debt at par. From then on, they engaged in steady conflict. Hamilton's financial plan, the Washington administration's heavy-handed response to the Whiskey Rebellion, the Jay Treaty, an unofficial war with France, the Alien and Sedition Acts, all of these Hamilton regarded as necessary for the preservation of the Republic. Jefferson, of course, regarded them as destructive of the fundamental ideals on which the Republic was founded. He also believed that such Federalist policies were likely to alienate the people from whom the federal government derived its power. And he was correct. And the Federalists were turned out in the election of 1800, which was called a revolution because it marked the first peaceful transfer of power in our history. The vote for president was an electoral tie between Jefferson and Aaron Burr. And the decision was thrown to the House of Representatives, which you will be shocked to learn immediately deadlocked. Much as Hamilton loathed Jefferson, He believed that Jefferson was a man of principle, and he knew that Burr was not. Hamilton successfully used his influence to break the tie in Jefferson's favor, one of the several actions that led to his fatal duel with Burr in 1804. Hamilton also understood something about Jefferson that the man himself did not or would not let himself acknowledge, that once president, he would make strong use of the federal power he had despised while in opposition. And Hamilton was correct. Jefferson proved a strong executive, sending the Navy to deal with the Barbary pirates, doubling the size of the country in the Louisiana Purchase, both without consulting Congress. He left the despised Bank of the United States alone, and his rigorous enforcement of the wildly unpopular embargo drove New Englanders, some of them meeting here, virtually to secession using the same argument and the same language Jefferson employed when imposing federal actions in the 1790s. And, nice touch here, this most unmilitary of men established West Point. Now, there's a lot more that can be said about these two, but that's what I have time for this evening. Suffice it to say that they comprise the yin and the yang of American political culture, either side of the coin, if you will. And tonight, the choice is yours. Have fun.
Vic Henningsen, thank you so much. All right, there's going to be a very short break. And yes, if you need to use the restrooms, they're downstairs, or have a drink, you can do that. But mostly, you have to reassemble into Hamiltonians who are on this side of the house, and Jeffersonians are going to be over here. Now, you obviously can stay where you are. You can consult your neighbors. You will be called upon. There will be cold calling if I have to. So in about 5 minutes, we will reconvene, and we will talk about which vision of America was preferable. Hamiltonians here, Jeffersonians here. Good luck. All right, for those who are not present, you might be watching this after the fact from our recording. The room is relatively evenly split between the Hamiltonians and the Jeffersonians, which I think is actually a wonderful sign that you have split in this way. I've been asked by some of the Hamiltonians if they have to wrap their answers because of the recent musical. I've assured them you do not. You can speak in whatever tones you'd like. Who would like to be the first person to make the case for the Hamiltonian vision of America and to tell us why you are on this side of the room? And to make it easier for you, you don't have to be in character from the 1790s. You can speak from the present day. But we're going to start with the Hamiltonians, and I would love some volunteers. If I do not get volunteers, I will begin the cold calling. And I was a law professor before I was a head of school, so I'm perfectly comfortable with the Socratic method. All right, and would you mind please also telling everyone who you are, if you're willing?
I'm Barbara Sanderson. I'm married to Bob, class of '60 in Andover. And I really don't know that I'm completely a Hamiltonian, but I certainly believe that government is necessary to, I forgot what I was going to say. Let's see, there's several things that I wanted to say. To abolish slavery and to create the National Treasury to pay back. I really appreciate what you did, to try and get money back to the people who served this country in the Revolutionary War. And I think that people tend to be beasts, but I don't say it's just the common man.
Thank you. Excellent arguments from the Hamiltonian side. Let's have a few more Hamiltonian perspectives, and then we will switch over to some responses. Yes, sir.
Okay, I've had a drink or two, so I'll keep it very simple. When Jefferson became an executive and no longer had the opportunity to be an idealist, he became a Hamiltonian.
Very interesting. Those are fighting words, absolutely. Happens to be true. That whole Louisiana Purchase without the Congress thing, that was pretty impressive. Who else would like to make the case? All right. And if you are willing to say who you are in your class and so forth, you're most welcome.
Hello, my name's Chris Blackwood. I'm class of 12, one of the ex-students of Mr. Rotundo. And I'm going to butcher this quote, but I think it is a very good characterization of the relationship between Jefferson and Hamilton. I believe Hamilton referred to Jefferson as a hermaphrodite with neither the firmness nor force of a man, nor the grace and character of a woman. That being said, my family were refugees, speaking from the present tense, my families were refugees of communism. So that being said, I do not trust the common people with the power to rule the nation. And I see Hamilton ultimately as a pragmatist who understands that in order for a country to be powerful and strong within the external world, you have to have a centralized common power. So yes.
Mr. Rotundo, did you teach all this? We'll give him a chance afterward for comment. Any other Hamiltonians for the opening words? Yes, sir. Charlie.
Charles Herschler, class of 72. So along with a few other 72s, we basically circled what we liked in each column and ended up with almost a tie, which was 8 for Hamilton and 7 for Jefferson.
And Charles, is that why you were near the aisle? You've chosen something close to the Hamiltonian side?
Touche. Absolutely. So Hamiltonian, anyway. So we ended up with one more for Hamilton, liking broad construction, commerce, manufacturing worldwide, and Bank of U.S. as a necessary and proper. And we preferred supporting creditors than debtors, and preferred his version of abolishing slavery. So whereas we preferred the chosen people on that side, and maybe a minimum of restraint. But on balance, Hamilton eked it out.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the whole thought process. That's terrific. All right, Jeffersonians, it's your turn. I think just eyeballing it, there are fewer Jeffersonians, so you may have to speak louder and make a strong case. Who would like to make the Jeffersonian case? Yes, sir.
Don Schwartz, 58.
And Don, would you mind speaking into the mic that Vic has there? Thank you.
It's my understanding that Thomas Jefferson was more worried about the growth of an all-powerful monarchical dictatorial type government than was Hamilton. He had less faith in big government. And judging from where we are today, Thomas Jefferson, unfortunately, was right. Also, in the area of interpretation of the Constitution, Jefferson was right. Massive distortions have obviously been made of the key amendments, much to the danger of our country. So Jefferson turns out to have been right.
Thank you. I had a student who last year with this assignment had a title for her essay, which was TJ for the win, which I thought was a very clever one. So you've got TJ for the win on constitutional interpretation grounds. All right. Other Jeffersonian viewpoints? Yes, sir. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Charlie Kendrick, class of 1960 at PA. And I used to have an argument with one of my business partners on this very subject. And why I'm sitting on this side of the aisle is that somebody has to have the vision, to lead the country wherever it needs to go, given the circumstances with which he's dealing or she is dealing. And somebody has to be able to make the money work. It's my feeling that the one with the vision is the most critical, or the more critical of those two skills. And it's not surprising under those conditions that once put in office, Mr. Jefferson used Mr. Hamilton's financial model to fix that problem while he bought the rest of the American continent.
So Charlie, this is actually a little confusing to me, just so I can clarify. First of all, most people tend to think that Hamilton was the money guy and he got that closer to right. But if I understand what you're saying, you liked Hamilton's ideas, but you wanted them wielded by Jefferson. Is that a fair depiction of your statement?
I wanted them wielded by a larger vision than Hamilton had of where the nation ought to go. He used Hamilton's model as a tool to get where he wanted to go, and then he went beyond that.
Very subtle. Hamiltonians, you better be storing up your responses. We'll have a couple more. He's on your side. Well, he was a little on your side in terms of a vision for America, but with a really interesting, nuanced perspective. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Tom Sobel, father of Indiana and Reeve, who are currently at the school right now. And you, sir, Mr. Hamiltonian, you, sir, are a rogue nationalist. I believe that the aggregation of power means the abuse of power, and that's what you stand for. And let's not talk about the past, let's talk about the present. What does the present mean? The fact that Jefferson stood up to our society and made sure that there was a diversity of power means that gay rights emerged from states' rights. It means that there will be equality of health care that emerges first from Massachusetts as an example for the country. This is not something that is in the past. The fact of the matter is that Jefferson's principles of diversity of power were more critical than the kind of oppression that you, sir, stand for.
Wow. Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. No, Mr. Vic, do not let him off the hook. He's going to have to say some more. So I'm interested in this gay rights example. The idea of the power. Vic, can we send the mic back down because he's going to get another chance at this? That gay rights came from the states.
Really need to be heard.
Go ahead. Well, for posterity, you'll be able to be heard by being on the mic. And of course, here we are in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where one could make that argument. Certainly, gay rights has a very important birthplace here, close to this very spot. But what if it were, say, Kentucky or elsewhere? Didn't it require the Supreme Court of the United States, an empowered judiciary, to make gay rights the law of the land?
And that's where I agree with you.
Ooh.
Because it is...
Hamiltonians, you got all of these guys co-opted.
Because it is the fact that Jefferson, unlike Hamilton, was willing to agree in the yin-yang. That the fact there had to be a national power, but there must be a counterbalance, which is a state power. And so you've seen through our society, and as I will recount, because I'm 57 years old, I have enough data points to predict the weather now. Okay? And in addition, I can predict political sense. And political sense tells us that over decades, you will have progressive attitudes through the national power and progressive attitudes through the state power.
Wonderful. Thank you. One of my favorite quotes recently emanating from the Congress was a debate a few years ago in which a member of the Congress argued that we no longer needed the National Weather Service at a federal level because we have weather.com. Nobody pointed out right on the spot where it actually came from. But anyway, that's a great example. I see that the gentleman in the middle would like to make a point, but I think just for equity, I think we did 4 from the Hamiltonians. I want to give 1 more to Jeffersonians. And Tony, you will have the chance immediately after that. So any other Jeffersonians, think about this opportunity. Old South Meeting House, where the very cradle of this republic. Wouldn't you like to speak up? Oh, good. There we go. Another lawyer. My goodness.
My name is Tony Hewitt. I'm from the class of '72 as well, but I'm on the other side of the aisle. And I think it was Tip O'Neill who said all politics is local. So my support for Jefferson is based on 2 factors. 1, My oldest daughter graduated from Phillips Academy a couple of years ago. She's about to graduate from the University of Virginia. 2, one of my old friends, Grace Curley, is holding the sign for Thomas Jefferson. So for those reasons, I support Jefferson.
Those 2 reasons are hard to beat, I will admit. Well said. All right, Tony Harry from the middle.
Tony Harry, class of 50. I think I'm the oldest one here. But I wanted to make an argument that neither side is the one that I would join, because politics fluctuates. Sometimes the Jeffersonians gain too much power, in which case I want to be a Hamiltonian, and other times the Hamiltonians acquire too much power, and I want to join the Jeffersonians because there's truth on both sides. And I think the worst thing is if we could become too extreme.
Tony, as you swing from side to side, please keep the mic here so everybody can get the full benefit of your forceful remarks.
More to say, but I do think that there's a danger in becoming too supportive of the Hamiltonian side with a strong central bank and a strong central government, the way Lincoln changed American history forever through the Civil War, which I think is detestable. But on the other hand, the Jeffersonians go too far the other way when the state loses power. We can't win against, such as in World War II, if we're Jeffersonians. We have to be Hamiltonians. So the times dictate which way we should go. And we have to be discriminating enough and perceptive enough to understand when we want to be on the one side or on the other. That's all.
All right, there we go. The two-handed lawyer on the one hand and on the other hand. We have it in the middle. All right, Hamiltonians, have you been storing up your responses? We'll have a few Hamiltonian responses and then Jeffersonians, and then I will turn it back to Tony Rotundo for closing remarks.
Hi, Mona Desai, class of 98. That actually resonated on my fundamental point of why I'm a Hamiltonian, and that is the strict reading of the Constitution versus a broader one. It was written at a point in time, and we didn't know what was going to happen from there. So the reason I'm on the Hamiltonian side versus the Jefferson side is that we do need a broader construction of the Constitution to allow for where we are in the current state of time.
Wonderful, thank you. Other Hamiltonians, it's your big chance at the Old South Meeting House. Anyone from this cluster? This is maybe the extreme Hamiltonian zone. Or else you just want to have a drink and be quiet over here in the... Yes, all right.
As a war veteran with one leg, Hamilton suffers from having been a poor shot. I think he would have done better if he had killed Aaron Burr. So his legacy is limited. But I think in terms of pragmatism, in terms of getting things done, I think we have to stray from the idealism and work toward practical solutions. And to me, that's what Alexander Hamilton embodied. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
And no hard feelings, huh? For the 75 cents or the 25 cents that you didn't get?
My wife knew more about finance than I thought she did. So things have worked out okay.
So this is an inside joke. I just want to make sure that everybody knows the inside joke, which is that Sandy Uri is CEO of Cambridge Associates, one of the most important financial firms in the world, and was recently acknowledged by Institutional Investor as a Lifetime Achievement Award winner alongside some others. So she actually knows quite a great deal about finance. Yes, sir. Another if this family had not been Hamiltonians, I would have really wondered what was going on. But.
Thank you. I want to speak for Hamilton's interest in nationalism and trying to bring the Jeffersonian states into a more or less uniform pattern. It's fine to have the states as laboratories of the republic, if you will, 50 individual little ones.
And that was Brandeis, right, who in the 20th century called them laboratories of democracy.
But the important thing for many of the poorer and downtrodden Americans is to defend them from some of the lesser state governments and try to preserve some level of equity amongst the resources of this incredible nation that has resources so that kids don't have to go hungry, that everyone has a home and a chance to educate their children, and on and on.
Now that sounds like political rhetoric, fitting of the space. Thank you. We have one more Hamiltonian. Yes, please. The last word from the Hamiltonian side, unless there are any secret Hamiltonians lurking over here as Jeffersonians.
Jessica Cole, class of 2008. And the last time I said that and people didn't yell 08 was a long time ago.
Jessica, are you going to wrap the Hamiltonian thing?
I know. So yes, I'm a big fan of the Hamilton soundtrack, so that certainly helped me sitting here. But actually, my comrade in Hamiltonianism was actually just talking about defense and talking about it mostly from an inwards perspective. I'm actually thinking about it from a national perspective outwards, which is the fact that as nice as it is for us to have these laboratories of democracy and for us to be able to take some time and look inwards, the fact of the matter is almost no one has talked about the fact that we're being fought at every turn, and that for each of us, any individual state would not have the means to defend ourselves. And so if we're going to have the time and the space to develop all of these kind of feelings about the Constitution and ways that we want to move forward, we first need to defend our borders, and we need the resources and the central power in order to do that.
Excellent. And Jessica Cole gets extra points because that was really that was in character from the 1790s, right? That was fantastic. I didn't even make it that hard. All right, the final word from the Jeffersonians, and then we'll go. Oh no more. We'll turn it over to Tony Rotundo for the truly last word. Oh, you are? You're defecting? Oh, I see. All right. We'll have one defector, and then we'll come over here. Well, you got to get over there. You need a seat. Look at this. So, unexpected. Any Jeffersonians? What? No. Go.
There's something that's left out in this comparison and contrast, which is how Jefferson related to the Bible. And my understanding is he looked it over, took a pair of scissors, and cut out all the parts that didn't belong there. I think that's fantastic. So, and I don't know if Hamilton had one and how he felt about it.
Or he could have cared less. I'm not sure. Vic Henningsen, would you like to give us any?
He cut out everything he thought was supernatural. Yeah.
He is in Jefferson.
Jefferson cut it out.
The question was, what did Hamilton do?
Geez, damned if I know.
Wasn't a big issue.
I think. I mean, he's buried in the burying ground at Trinity Church in New York. I think he was a good Episcopalian, good Anglican.
But it's interesting that Jefferson was a strict constructionist with regard to the Constitution, but not apparently with regard to the Bible.
Not with respect to the Bible. Well, I think it is possible that Jefferson is open to the flip-flopping charge, as are others in this room. So, very well done. All right, who are other Jeffersonians? Excellent.
I'm Martha McNamara. I'm the parent of a senior at Phillips. And to the point about enemies from beyond, I would argue that one of the reasons that the Hamiltonians were able to succeed was, I would draw your attention to the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, which permitted federal government to deport all aliens regarded as dangerous to public safety, and also to imprison all political dissenters who bring government into disrepute. So I would argue that the Hamiltonians are able to achieve their policies only by oppressing dissent.
Extremely well said. Extremely well said. All right. Ooh. I can't believe no Hamiltonian went there about the whole slavery thing. Very interesting. All right.
Hi, I'm Colleen from the class of 2010. Secret book is here. I'd just like to remind everyone that if Hamilton had his way, George Washington would have been a king. So
it's the whole monarchy card. It gets pulled at the end. That's true.
No, that's all I have to say.
That's it? All right.
That's all I had to say.
Well said. Any last words from the Jeffersonians? You have one more crack. All right, perfect.
Gabriella Romano, mother of class of 10.
I think that we wouldn't have won the war without the French. And it seems pretty bad that we're going back to, Hamiltonians want us to go back to Great Britain and to abandon the French.
Very interesting. All right, foreign policy kicks in right at the end too. Well done. So that is an excellent roundup, and I think we've established some very good contours of the debate. Tony Rotundo is going to get the conclusion, but before that, Vic Henningsen, do you want to say anything, since this will be your last
except
chance?
that the comment on the Alien and Sedition Acts. John Adams was very dubious about the constitutionality of those acts, and the best information we have is that the reason that he signed them was because Abigail thought they were a good idea.
All right. If you haven't read the wonderful letters from Abigail Adams to her husband, they are absolutely worth every minute of it, and the students in my class spend a lot of time with those letters. Vic, thank you, and Tony for the final word.
Thank you. Want to thank Vic and John for the opportunity to play William Phillips tonight. As I said to a couple of my former students during the break, after 33 years of teaching at PA, it's nice to be able to shrug off known Sibby once in a while. Ira Berlin is one of the greatest living historians of American slavery. And Ira Berlin recently said that history is not the study of the past. History is the study of the arguments that we have about the past. Thank you for participating in the process of history tonight. As you do, as we all do all the time whenever we reflect on the past and extract meaning from it. In fact, Vic mentioned in his opening remarks that a lot of the disagreement between the Federalists and between the Hamiltonians, I guess I should say in tonight's context, and the Jeffersonians was about the meaning of the Revolution. So here is an experience that they had all had just a few years before, and they were already in verbal and political combat with each other. A political death match, as I think Vic properly points out at times, over the meaning of recent events in which so many of them had risked their lives. And thinking about that, one thing that as I thought about tonight, I thought about when I first got interested in U.S. history, which was when I was 12 or 13, which is more than half a century ago now. And my parents were both academics and rock-ribbed New Deal liberals. And as I began to ransack their U.S. history books, it's a kind of a, Vic can appreciate it, pathetic image of a 13-year-old reading Charles Beard's interpretation of constitutional history, but there I was. And for New Deal liberals like my parents in the 1950s, Jefferson was God and Hamilton was evil incarnate. Jefferson was someone who believed in that the people were good, that the people were virtuous, and that if we had a government that was intensely responsible to the people, that our country and our freedom would always be in good shape. Well, that was always an easier argument to get my students to appreciate than the Hamiltonian argument, until sometime in the last 15 or 20 years. Used to be when I had these debates, I had to kind of load, I had to step in on the side of the Hamiltonians a little bit to make it even. And at some point I began to realize that I didn't need to do that anymore. And think about the recent presidential debates. Take Bernie Sanders. And I'm sure there are a few people in the room who would say, please. not my those aren't my politics, but I know many of you feel that way. And is Bernie Sanders a Hamiltonian or a Jeffersonian? If you listen to last night's debate, on the surface, he sounded very Jeffersonian. He wants what he calls a political revolution for the people, for the common people to mobilize around sets of issues that concern them directly. But he is also, if you think about it, underneath it all, very Hamiltonian. What he really wants is a strong activist central government, a strong activist Hamiltonian state that would make Thomas Jefferson rotate in his grave at high speed. And yet, you know, you can continue to flip back and forth with these things. But I have to admit that being a believer in a strong activist state, I find myself increasingly thinking Hamiltonian thoughts, and have for many years. And you know, I'm kind of glad my parents aren't around to argue with me. It could be an unpleasant argument. But I think one thing that a couple things that tonight's discussion showed really effectively is that both of their philosophies are so complex that it's very hard to take yourself in the present and say, I'm a Jeffersonian, he's a Hamiltonian, she's a Jeffersonian, and so on. Very difficult to do. You know, it may be on the current political scene that Rand Paul is about as close as we can get to somebody who's purely Jeffersonian. I can't think of anybody who is as purely Hamiltonian as he is Jeffersonian. But again, my example of Bernie Sanders, go down that list that Vic gave you of the two ideologies, and it's pretty hard to figure out which side any of the candidates really belongs on. And I guess my final comment is that it really interested me how often people's arguments on either side of the debate tonight boil down to, well, you can't achieve your ideals unless you've got our ideals to empower you. And I heard that argument in various forms from both sides. And I think maybe that's the ultimate point. As Vic said, these are the two kind of defining opposites of our political system and of our political ideology. And if we ever become a nation that's too Hamiltonian or too Jeffersonian, that's when we may be in trouble.
Tony Rotundo, thank you. So I get the truly last word, and I really want to thank everyone for their wonderful engagement. Vic and Tony, thank you for such an engaging return to this classroom. Let's have one more round of applause for Vic and Tony. Thank you. I also want to issue one very big thank you. I could thank many people from the team at Phillips Academy who have come here tonight to support this event, but one person in particular stands out for her hard work, for her idea of this event, and for her hard work on it, and that's Crystal McGuire. I just want to say thank you, Crystal, for bringing us here. Really spectacular. And in closing, I just want to thank you for all being part of the Andover community. I can't actually think of another better group to come together to have this debate about what kind of republic we want and to have it today. I really appreciate the fact that we have people changing their mind. Bob, in the midst of, I made a joke about flip-floppers, but I actually think that this robust engagement in these topics and trying to figure out where we stand today, hundreds of years after the founding of the republic, it is what will keep our republic strong, is this literal engagement. And when I think about what makes me sad or worried about politics today, it's when people don't do exactly what you've done tonight. The fact that the Boston regional event, and thank you to the Boston leadership team for bringing us here together, should have had its highest turnout in history. To have this debate, I think, is just a wonderful sign about Andover, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. And thank you all so much for coming this evening. Have a wonderful time. Thank you.